Welcome to the explanation page by page of the TREC 1 to 4 Family Residential Contract. This is Ann LaCusta and I'm your broker. This is going to be a quick bullet point summary of page 1 of the contract. Let's start with paragraph 1, the parties to the contract. The first blank is for the seller. Please do not assume that the tax rolls are correct. They frequently are not. And especially in the case of divorce or probate, the tax rolls can be incorrect. So if there's been a death or divorce, you will want to call upon your friendly neighborhood title company rep to help you determine who actually is the seller of the property. And this is particularly true if you are the listing agent. You want to do this when you list the property. You want to find out when you list the property who actually is the seller. Many times in the case of divorce, people will tell you, oh yeah, I got the house in the divorce decree. I've been making mortgage payments. Oh yeah, I've got the house. But they never actually went to Denton County and changed the name on the title. So then when it comes time to close, all of a sudden they have to chase down the other spouse, who then finds out that the home is selling for more than anticipated, and back to mediation they go. It can cause quite a snafu. So you will want to be sure when you list a property that you know exactly who the seller is, and to the best of your ability, you will want to get the seller correct on this 1 to 4 contract. The buyer should be the names as they are going to take title. So this is not the mortgage. This is not who's going to be on the mortgage. This is who's going to be on the title. So you'll want to put that who the buyer is on the title. Let's look at paragraph 2. Lot, block, subdivision or addition, city, county, and then known as is the street address and zip code. So most of the time you're going to be selling in a subdivision. It's going to show up clearly on the tax rolls and on the MLS sheet, and you'll just populate that in. When you are out more rural, you may need to use only the known as blank and put the best possible listing description. The best possible description of the property from the tax rolls, and it may show some crazy long description of property, and that's okay. You will want to put everything you can. You usually will have a city and a county, and then in known as you'll put whatever you can. All right, let's look at improvements, paragraph B and C. These are very important and very clearly spelled out. If you have questions about what should transfer with the property, start by reading paragraph B and C. It's actually spelled out very clearly here. Permanently installed and built-in items. So I'll say it again. Permanently installed and built-in items. So mirrors, ceiling fans, mailboxes, antennas, mounts and brackets for televisions and speakers. So unless the speakers are in the wall, if the speakers are on a mount or a bracket, then the speaker doesn't stay, but the bracket does stay. Air conditioning units, security equipment, yes, garage door openers, shrubbery, grandma's rosebush stays, unless it's excluded. Go on down to C. It also includes all accessories. So fireplace screens, curtains and rods, blinds, draperies and rods. Yes, that curtain and rod that match the bedspread, yep, they remain unless you exclude them here, which would go into paragraph D, 2D. And anything that's going to be excluded goes in paragraph 2D. Please be aware that when you list a property, sometimes you can find yourself in trouble because you were careful on the listing and excluded it. It shows up on the listing agreement as excluded. And then you put it in MLS carefully. This is excluded. But it did not end up here in paragraph 2D as excluded. Therefore, it is not excluded. Unfortunately, even if you remembered at the listing, you remembered in MLS, that is not contractual. This is the contract. So you will have to list it here in paragraph 2D, or it is not excluded from the sale. That right there is what can cost realtors money, right? If it's your mistake, you may find yourself compensating the buyer for draperies that you should have known to have excluded from the sale. So be careful. Let's look at paragraph 3A. This is the cash portion of the sale. So if it's 100% cash, you're going to put the sales price right here. Otherwise, you're going to put the amount of cash they're using as a down payment, and then you're going to put the financing amount right here in 3B. So notice there is a third-party financing addendum box right here, and that is what you're going to use most of the time. Very rarely will you use loan assumption or seller financing, and this is called third-party financing because it isn't the seller and it isn't the buyer. It's a third party financing the transaction. So anytime they're getting a mortgage or any sort of third-party financing, you'll put that amount here, and then A plus B must equal C, and C is the sales price that you're offering on the property. So make sure that you get that correct. All right, in paragraph 4, license holder disclosure. If you're working with your spouse, your parent, your child, yes, you must disclose that you're a license holder. Also, if you're working to purchase a home for an entity, an LLC or a 401k or IRA that you own at least 10% of, you must disclose that you're a license holder. If you are a trustee, you're buying it for a trust that you're the beneficiary of, you must disclose. If you ever have a question about whether you should disclose that you're a licensee or not, just go ahead and disclose it. I can't think of a negative, and it does protect you to go ahead and disclose it here in paragraph 4. All right, let's talk about paragraph 5, which is the earnest money. Buyer shall deposit blank amount of earnest money as earnest money with blank as escrow agent at blank the address. All right, let's talk about the amount here in the first blank in paragraph 5. There is no rule really about how much. So you're going to use a little bit of common sense here about whether it's multiple offers or not. Some people say 1%. So if it's, a $200,000 home, you might put $2,000 earnest money, but that isn't a requirement. Actually, there's a couple of strategies for you to be aware of. If you are the listing agent, you need to be aware that it is very rare and difficult for a seller to retain the earnest money. This contract has many places in it for the buyer to terminate and take their earnest money with them. So actually, someone putting a bigger earnest money down is not very impressive to an educated seller. That's why they work with you, right, for the education. So you're going to be able to explain to them that there are so many blanks where the buyer can terminate and take the earnest money with them. So additional earnest money here is not very impressive to a seller. Now, if you're working with a buyer, many listing agents do not understand that. So this can be a low risk way. So you might, in a multiple offer situation, put a little more earnest money here and hope that that impresses the listing agent and the seller. Because actually, it's very rarely at risk. Most of the time, if a problem comes up, your buyer can terminate and take the earnest money with them. So those are some strategies for you to be aware of. As earnest money with, so this is the name of the title company that's going to do the closing for you. And you'll want to be sure here in this third blank that you put the correct address. Title companies are frequently have different ownership, even though they have the same name. So you will want to be sure that you put the correct amount here with the correct title company name at the correct address. Which office are you going to use so that everybody can deposit the earnest money correctly? And then there's an additional earnest money blank and number of days to deposit additional earnest money. That is very rarely used, very, very rarely, but there are a couple of times when you might use it. One is if you know you're completing a backup contract. So when you execute a backup contract, you must deposit the option fee and the earnest money when the contract is executed. So since you don't know that you're ever going to be the primary contract, you might put a low amount of earnest money, $50, in the first blank, and you might go ahead and put the larger amount of earnest money as an additional deposit, maybe in 25 days or something like that. By that time, you would know if you were going to be the primary contract or not, more than likely. So that can be a time to use additional earnest money. Also, a time to use additional earnest money can be if there's some sort of research that has to occur. Maybe you're making this offer, but you really want the opportunity to go check out the route of a new railroad, or you want the opportunity to go check out how much it's going to be to do an addition that you're planning. Something like that, you can ask for additional time to deposit more earnest money. It is used very rarely, but it is possible that in those situations you might use it. All right, let's look at paragraph 6, which also continues about the title policy. Seller shall furnish to buyer at seller or buyer's expense. Everyone wants there to be a rule. The seller should pay, the buyer should pay. It's the buyer's choice, it's the seller's choice. What it is negotiable. It is 100% negotiable on each and every contract. So you are going to want to just be aware that there aren't rules about who pays or who provides. So at seller's expense, I suppose, could be considered customary. The seller is proving to the buyer that they have clear title to the property. At buyer's expense makes some sense also because it's actually insurance for the buyer. Particularly in a multiple offer situation, it is not uncommon for buyer's expense to be checked. That really can be a great strategy if you're in multiple offers and you're worrying about the appraisal. If I offer more, we won't be able to get it appraised and that'll cause a problem. Checking 6 for buyer's expense is a great way to increase seller net without increasing the sales price. It's a way to increase seller net without increasing the sales price. So you might want to consider checking it in that multiple offer situation. And then the title policy issued by is the name of the title company that's going to issue the title policy. So most of the time, that's going to be the same company that's in blank 5 as earnest money with this company who's doing the closing for you, and then blank 6 would be the same company. But it isn't always that way. Sometimes there's a closing agent, which goes in blank paragraph 5, and then a different name of a different company is going to do the examination and issue the title policy. So just make sure you know that information and how the title company that is involved in this transaction works, because both ways are fine. You just have to get it right. And that is the end of page 1.